You could go without food for a while. But without water, your body began negotiating with death almost immediately. For your ancestors, thirst was not a weekend inconvenience or a forgotten water bottle. It was the invisible border around every day, every hunt, and every decision. So how did ancient humans survive without clean water? Here's the thing. They weren't looking for clean water, at least. Not the way we think about it. Today, clean water means it's treated, filtered, tested, and piped right into a room where you barely even think about it. But in the deep past, safe enough meant something entirely different. It meant finding water that was flowing instead of stagnant. It meant catching rainwater before a herd of animals could trample through it, or finding water cleverly hidden inside plants, roots, fruits, blood, and meat. To do that, water couldn't just be an object. It had to be a pattern. Think you could read that pattern? Well, your ancestors could. They didn't just look at the scenery. They were reading a map. They watched the birds, knowing they'd naturally fly toward water at specific times of day. They tracked animal trails because hoofprints always converged, where thirst pulled multiple species to the same spot. They looked for greener grass, softer soil, buzzing insects, and the shallow dips in the land where rainwater might linger. A modern person sees scenery. An ancient person saw a map. Take anthropologist Richard B. Lee, for example. When he studied the Juhuwansi people of the Kalahari, he recorded how these hunter-gatherers survived in incredibly dry landscapes. Their secret? Knowing the exact locations and the seasonal reliability of waterholes. Now, to us, a waterhole is exactly what it sounds like, a puddle in the ground. But to the people who depended on it, it wasn't just a puddle. It was memory. It was politics. It was literal survival stored in the mind. And that leads us to the first real secret. Ancient humans didn't survive because the landscape was generous to them. They survived because this life-saving knowledge was deeply social, passed from older people to younger people, from trackers to children, across generations of thirsty bodies. A child back then didn't have a map app. They had a grandmother who remembered exactly where the last dry season nearly wiped everyone out. What would that memory actually feel like? Imagine waking up before the heat becomes dangerous. The sky is pale orange, and the ground is cool for just a little while longer. Your camp is quiet, save for the crackle of last night's fire and people quietly coughing as they shake off sleep. No one has to stand up and announce, "Today, we must find hydration." Everyone already knows. A few people just start walking toward a known source, not because they're guessing, but because someone has walked there before. Someone has counted the days since it last rained, and someone noticed that the tracks near camp are turning in the exact same direction. Picture this. You're heading out, but you carry no plastic bottle, no metal canteen. Maybe you carry a skin bag, a shell, a gourd, an ostrich eggshell container, or sometimes nothing at all. In some African archaeological sites, fragments show that people actually used these strong ostrich eggshells as water containers tens of thousands of years ago. An eggshell container sounds ridiculously fragile to us. But in a bone-dry world, that shell could mean the literal difference between reaching the next place and collapsing on the way. But here's the really wild part. Water wasn't just found in holes. Sometimes it was eaten. Look at the Hadza people of Tanzania, a modern hunter-gatherer society studied by researchers like Alyssa Crittenden and Herman Ponser. They get hydration from many sources across a day, including foods gathered straight from the landscape. This doesn't mean ancient people never drank directly. It just means hydration was baked right into their entire way of living. Things like berries, tubers, honey, meat, and plant fluids weren't just calories, they were moisture. They were basically tiny water containers made by nature. Take a tuber, for example. It's essentially a swollen underground plant part, like a natural storage organ. Some tubers hold water because plants use them to survive dry periods. To a thirsty human, that stored water sounds like a jackpot. But there's a catch. It's only useful if you know exactly which tuber to dig up. Only if you know which one is poisonous. And only if you know exactly how deep to look. So, that brings us to the second secret of ancient survival. Clean water wasn't always a place. Sometimes it was cleverly hidden inside your food. But wait, what about germs? This is where the story takes a dark turn. Your ancestors had absolutely no idea what bacteria, viruses, or parasites were. The microscope wouldn't be invented until way later in human history, so they weren't standing around thinking, this water contains invisible organisms that might cause dysentery. Instead, they relied on what they knew best. Patterns. Bad smell? Avoid it. Dead animal nearby? Move on. Muddy water after a herd drank from it? Skip it. It wasn't modern science, but it was hard evidence collected by their own bodies. If people got sick after drinking from a stagnant pool, that memory was locked in. If children got stomach pain from one source, but not from a rock seep where groundwater slowly leaks through stone, they remembered it. Moving through soil and rock couldn't make it pure, but it could filter out visible dirt and some dangers. But did they always get it right? Absolutely not. They suffered. They vomited. They got diarrhea, which, in a hot climate, is a death sentence because it rapidly drains water and salts right out of your body. A bad water source could kill quickly, especially children, simply because the invisible world was invisible. Ancient survival wasn't this perfect, harmonious adaptation. It was a brutal, constant game of risk management. And then, someone changed the rules. Then came fire. Fire didn't magically solve the water problem overnight, but it completely changed what was possible. Archaeologists have found evidence of fire deep inside Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back around 1 million years. At Gesher Beno Yaakov, researchers found burned flint, seeds, and wood from nearly 790,000 years ago. Boiling water is a superpower because extreme heat kills those dangerous microbes. But think about it. Boiling requires a fireproof container, fuel, and time. That's not exactly simple when you're constantly moving across a landscape. So, before pottery was even a thing, how did they pull it off? Enter an ancient genius life hack: stone boiling. Instead of putting a container on the fire, they heated stones directly in the flames. Once those rocks were incredibly hot, they dropped them straight into a hide-lined pit, a wooden vessel, or a bark container filled with water. The hot stones caused the water to rapidly warm up or boil without exposing the heat-sensitive container to direct flames. It sounds bizarre today, but that's only because your electric kettle has hidden the magic trick. But even with clever tricks, your body still carries the ancient risk inside it. Thirst isn't just a polite reminder to grab a drink. It's a blaring alarm system. Dry mouth, headache, dizziness, fatigue. Those aren't random annoyances. They are ancient messages screaming that the liquid inside you is becoming too precious to waste. Here is the brutal trade-off. In extreme heat, your body cools itself by sweating. Sweat is water leaving your skin and taking heat with it. It's a brilliant biological system, but it is incredibly expensive. Every single drop that cools you is a drop you have to replace. Move too much in the heat, and you sweat out your water. Don't move at all, and you fail to find a new source. So how did your ancestors solve this impossible math? Not with sheer toughness, but with timing. They moved early. They rested in the shade. They followed strict seasonal routes, and whenever possible, they camped near reliable water. Because a beautiful landscape without water isn't a home, it's a trap. You can actually see this in the archaeology. Sites near lakes, rivers, springs, and wetlands pop up over and over again because water literally pulls life toward itself. At Gesher Beno Yaakov in the Jordan Valley, researchers found evidence of humans living near an ancient lakeshore hundreds of thousands of years ago. To them, a lakeshore wasn't just a pretty view. It was a supermarket, a highway, a hunting ground, and a water source all rolled into one. Imagine standing by that lake in the deep past, reeds moving in the wind, birds lifting from the shallows, animal tracks marking the mud like writing. Your group doesn't need to invent a theory of ecology, meaning the relationship between living things and their environment. You are living right inside it. Fish might be nearby, plants might be edible, and water makes the whole landscape speak louder. But water also attracts massive danger. Predators have to drink too. Large, aggressive animals crowd the edge. Parasites breed in the wet mud. A water source is ultimate safety and extreme danger at the exact same time. Would you walk down to that water alone at dusk? Probably not. And neither did they. Your ancestors survived by doing highly dangerous things together. Someone kept watch while someone else drank. Someone listened to the brush while someone filled a container. Someone knew exactly which direction those fresh lion tracks were heading. Safety wasn't a product you could buy. It was attention shared deeply between people. So here's the biggest counterintuitive twist of all. The ultimate protection wasn't actually about finding ways to make dirty water clean. It was about organizing their entire lives so they rarely had to gamble on the worst water to begin with. Your ancestors didn't just wander aimlessly through a thirsty emptiness. They planned around water. They remembered around water. They made every seasonal choice based on water. This is exactly why elders mattered so much, and why, in a brutal dry season, a grandmother's memory was infinitely more valuable than a hunter's muscle. Today, we're sold this idea that survival is all about gear. A high-tech filter, a fancy purifier, a survival straw. Those tools are great, but ancient survival wasn't a product. It was a relationship with the land, the seasons, and the people who held the knowledge you didn't have yet. Because humans are built for long-distance endurance, but let's be real, endurance without water isn't strength. It's just a countdown. Fast forward to today. You wake up, turn a handle, and a massive hidden system delivers water right to your glass. We are entirely cushioned from the ancient problem. If the modern grid failed tomorrow and your taps ran dry, how many days do you think you'd survive? Let me know your honest guess in the comments. Ancient humans didn't survive because they were simply tougher or more heroic than you. They survived through memory, through timing, through shared attention. You are thirsty before you are hungry. And for most of human history, that thirst wasn't just a feeling, it was a map.